We are in the next phase of our program, and it's really my pleasure to introduce Stephen Johnson, the Honorable Stephen Johnson, who was the 11th EPA, head of the EPA, and his talk is Balancing Energy, Economic, and Environmental Benefits. Steve is now serving on a number of boards, including Flex Energy. And without further ado, let me turn it over.
Well, thank you very much. Well, I chose the topic for today, and thank you, Dean, for the kind invitation. And also let me say, congratulations, Chapman University, 150 years. As I was reminded, I recently had a 60th birthday, and my 4-year-old grandson said, "Now, is it true that you're now 100 years old?" Now, I feel like 150, but probably only look like 60. And don't worry, I'm not going to comment on your hairstyle or lack thereof. So today, I want to spend a few minutes achieving a clean, affordable, and abundant energy supply for the U.S. Let me put this in perspective. On Thursday and Friday, I was in a community outside of Washington, D.C., and I was speaking to a group of first graders and second graders. They are a very tough audience, except there is still a respect for someone with the kind of gray hair that I have. But it was interesting as I talked to, and it was indeed one of my grandson, he's a second grader, our oldest, and so I had agreed to come to the school and speak to the mass of these children. And I did a little experiment with them, and it was about water. And I want to make just a few introductory comments, and then I'm going to get to the heart of a number of the issues I want to talk about today. First, just a few comments. One, unfortunately, LA has not corrected and solved the smog problem. It has made significant progress thanks to regulations, and we can certainly talk about that. As the dean spoke, I am a recovering regulator, so bear with me, all right? Please bear with me. Second is, I do believe that greenhouse gas emissions need to be curbed, and climate change is a serious issue, not only for the United States, but the world at large that needs to be addressed. Make no mistake, that's what I believe. Third is, I had a couple questions for you. How many of you pick up your favorite scientific journal, Scientific American, The Economist, every day and read it? All right, how many of you read the Wall Street Journal? Okay, I thought so. It was just interesting. Last Friday, I was just reading the paper as I usually do. Here are some of the articles from last Friday's Wall Street Journal. For West oil firms, no love lost for Libya. Tennessee utility reaches clean air deal with EPA. Siemens rethinks nuclear ambitions. Climate change heads to the Supreme Court. Japan companies look to save energy. The topic of today is not only given the price of oil and the crisis in Libya and the worldwide crisis. I mean, there's a lot of influencers, and it is this kind of conference and the important opportunity to have a dialogue is critical for not only our nation, but all nations to move in an appropriate direction in trying to achieve this balance that we're referring to. So as I look to what am I going to cover, talk about today, there are three things, because I want to make this worth the price of admission that you paid. That's a joke. All right, the first is there, for the alternative energy sector in achieving this balance, is there a strategic vision impairment? In other words, you need another pair of glasses, or Bausch & Lomb is here. Do you need another set of Bausch & Lomb? How do you like that informal plug? I appreciate that, yeah. Remember, I'm now no longer a regulator, and I can accept checks. So, all right. But second topic I want to cover is what I would like to share with you and think through with you. Are we dealing with impossible measures of success? And then the last topic I want to cover is, and this is the money shot, roadmap to energy independence, economic prosperity, and environmental protection. Wow, that's worth the price of admission. But again, setting the stage, these are among multiple graphs that have been used. On the lower part, you see coal, you see petroleum, which has had, even though there's been increased use as an overall percentage, historical net electricity generation, you see that number getting smaller. And then you see the very top is the non-hydro renewables. So, is there a window of opportunity, and certainly in the electric generation area and technology, for renewable technologies, alternative technologies that replace or supplement these other areas? Absolutely. So, let's get in this. Alternative energy strategic vision impairment. So, the first issue is, and I did this specifically for the dean, is that I don't believe that balancing benefits follows the second law of thermodynamics. Now, I know it's been a while since some of you have had any course in physics. By the way, there's some excellent courses offered at Chapman University. Okay, you've got to work with me here, okay? The second law of thermodynamics, Steve Johnson style, is that over time, just over time, temperature and a number of other variables just come into balance. The reality for energy, the environment, and our economic consideration, E cubed, is that it doesn't follow the second law of thermodynamics. It requires an active participation and active decision-making to achieve the balance. It's not going to happen, if you will, by accident, or in physics terms, by the second law of thermodynamics. Second is that following the line of impairment, and I didn't really know that Bausch & Lomb was going to be here. By the way, I understand they're helping to raise money for a new science center. Not a bad plug either. Huh? Okay. All right. But technology myopia. What is myopia? You see things near, but distance is kind of fuzzy. And some of us suffer that. A number of years ago, my ophthalmologist said, "Steve, I'm sorry to inform you you're suffering from B&B." And I said, "What's that?" And he said, "Bifocals and bulges." So, but as you think about alternative energy and, in fact, trying to achieve this balance, in the alternative space, I'll say we really have a technology myopia. I mean, we are really focused on the piece today. Is there a silver bullet? Are there silver BBs, thousands of them? But what is it in our sight today? And of course, that is only magnified if you are a member of the legislature, or others. Third, how many of you took Latin? Pachyra aquatica. You know what it is? It is actually the money tree. There is a plant called the money tree, or the money plant. That happens to be its Latin name. And as you look at our strategic vision impairment, we all find ourselves, or my observation is, we find ourselves, if the money tree is not planted in our backyard, and if it's only the money tree for us, then it's not a good strategy, and in fact, our strategic vision is impaired. The last is, We all know what a kiosk is, you know, that sort of multi-sided open piece, sometimes in gardens. It's an information center. How many of you are old enough to remember the guy called Paladin? Yeah, some of you do. You know, dark clothes, black hat, boots, tough guy. Well, Paladin is actually a noun, and it's a noun meaning a champion. So, what are you? And what is your industry? Are you a kiosk? You provide information, which is good. Or are you a paladin? And is that your vision for alternative energy? As you look at the U.S. energy consumption by source, we know what the big sources are. And again, where the big opportunities are for alternative energy strategies. And, of course, the need, given the crises that are currently dealing with. Nuclear power, I wouldn't be so quick to discount nuclear power. Clearly, the situation in Japan and an aging infrastructure around the world in nuclear power has to be addressed, and the lessons learned. But as we all know, there are precious few sources of energy to power our economy and power our social needs. So I wouldn't be so quick to discount it. Well, second area, what I refer to as the impossible measures of success. Having been at EPA, and now, if you will, in the private sector, I think I've heard them all. And as a recovering regulator, or as an investor, or as a board director, as an academic, you can fill in the blank as a CEO. Here's just a partial list of the measures of success that you in the world of alternative energy is being judged on. And we talked about some of them, or they were highlighted earlier today. Not in my backyard. Now, I don't know about your community. I live outside of Washington, D.C., and I will tell you in our community that to cite a library is controversial, let alone a power plant, let alone a wind farm, and you can fill in the blank. So if your measure of success is that you're going to have everybody happy that you're their neighbor, again, in my experience, it's going to be an impossible measurement of success. Of course, as a consumer, as I got our electric bill, by the way, I live and built a clean tech house 12 years ago. My mother-in-law and father-in-law, whom I love dearly and have a great relationship, live down the street. Their house is a third the size, and this past month, their electric bill was twice as much. But so as consumers, what is the expectation, the measure of success? Well, we all want to pay less money. What about business? Oh, we don't want to pay any more money. What about government? Hey, haven't you heard about the budget in California? Haven't you heard about the $14 trillion debt for the United States? Oh, well, no, I'm a utility, and I like wind and solar. One, because I'm being told I have to like it, whether by the federal government, by the state government, or by your spouse. But we have to have continuous baseload power. We have to guarantee. Well, yes, you do. So how does that reconcile? So if the measure of success is continuous baseload power, then alternative energy sources are in trouble. Oh, well, before we're going to spend that million plus millions of dollars, with or without incentives, it has to be a proven technology with, pick the number, 5 years, 10 years of continuous service, so we know what the M&O costs are. Well, guess what? We'll never achieve. Interconnection. Oh, well, we'd like it for free. And of course, we don't have any impact on the grid. In my dealings, I have now heard of one of the most outrageous interconnection fees ever heard, not in this part of the country. I'll give you a hint. It's kind of Cajun country. The interconnection fee that was being talked about was $1.2 million. Now, if that's not a disincentive for alternative energy, I don't know what it is. Oh, by the way, you can't have any exploration. It needs to fully address the national security, energy supply, or price stability. We were talking earlier about Department of Defense. The reason why Department of Defense is investing as much money, and the reason why they're doing it, is yes, there are now executive order mandates, and they live in a command and control structure, but the reason is pure and simple: national security. National security. And so that is why they are so aggressive, and as a citizen, we want them to be so aggressive. So whatever our alternative energy source is, if it doesn't fully address national security energy, and that should be supply and price stability needs, then we shouldn't invest in it. Well, you get the point. Protects national sovereignty. Of course, it advances all international goals. Life cycle analysis concludes zero emissions. Commodity food prices, and I would include in that water. Both availability and prices reduced significantly, and everything is safe, and safe defined as a zero risk, and I'm sure there are others. So for all of us, whether you're talking about conventional energy sources or in alternative energy sources, our checklist really is an impossible measure of success. I don't know of any technology, any energy source that would be able to pass this litmus test. Therein lies the problem and the challenge we have. I think again, going back to the ultimate scientific journal that clearly a lot of us read, the Wall Street Journal. By the way, I like other papers. I can say that now, but I like the Wall Street Journal. But this is, again, one of the topics we were talking about earlier today, and that is climate change. And of course, as you know, there is a case right before the Supreme Court. The title of the Wall Street Journal article, Justices Skeptical in Emissions Case. Here's a quote by Chief Justice John Roberts. Chief Justice John Roberts agreed, quote, "The whole problem of dealing with global warming is that there are costs and benefits on both sides. And you have to determine how much you want to readjust the world economy." He went on to say, I quote, "I think that's a pretty big burden to impose on a district court judge," end quote. And I agree with him. So, impossible measures of success. Oh, I forgot to mention, there is this one other notion that also helps set the stage, or the challenges that we all face. Go back with me when I was in years past as an undergraduate student. In 1973-1974 era, who was president? President Nixon. What did he say we were going to do? He initiated a project called Project Independence. Quote, "At the end of the decade, in the year 1980, the United States will not depend on any other country for the energy we need." End quote. Well, not to be outdone, President Ford, what did he do? Well, he moved the date for achieving energy independence back to 1985. Well, let's go to President Carter, declaring energy independence, quote, is a moral equivalent of war, end quote. Quote, beginning this moment, this nation will never use more foreign oil than we did in 1977, end quote. Now, I won't bore you with President Bush 41, President Bush 43, President Clinton, but I do want to give you a quote from President Obama. And the quote is, "So we have a choice to make. We could remain one of the world's leading importers of foreign oil, or we can make the investments that would allow us to become the world's leading exporter of renewable energy," end quote. Now, I don't necessarily agree with many of his policies and other issues, but I do agree that we have a choice. So, what is our roadmap? Wow, you're waiting for the magic silver bullet answer. Well, I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. You achieve those. We have energy independence. And you will say, wow, I'm so glad Chapman University did this conference. Edison Electric is going to be thrilled, and we're all going to be just happy as could be. Well, I just read what each president had said, and so we know what the challenges are. But as I think about, as we map our future, a quote roadmap, is that one of the things that we have not done well, either in the alternative energy space or as an energy policy as a nation and or state, is really define realistic, I use the term interdisciplinary to capture the notion of economic, environmental, and energy needs. We need to clearly define what is our exam. Hopefully it's not the one that I put up on the board, because we'll never be able to achieve that. And often our ability to define these measures of success is dependent upon our local government and our local conditions. As Tip O'Neill said, all politics is local. In this case, balancing environment, energy, and economics is often very local as well. Second is clean tech catalysts. I thought I'd bring in chemistry for those of you who are chemistry buffs, are required for transformative and incremental technologies. The nature of a catalyst is it is an investment into the equation that accelerates the reaction. In our case, accelerates the development, the deployment, the acceptance of alternative energy sources. And you note that also I believe in the success formula or the roadmap. It not only has to be those areas of transformative change. I mean, we have a real problem with oil and consumption of oil. And oh, by the way, I don't think we're going to get rid of automobiles either. And I don't think I want to. And even if they're electric, we have to get the electricity from someplace, which then Edison has to have some source to get the electricity to the power stations, and you know. So it's not just the transformative technologies, but we also, and I think this is where we have not done very well as a nation, and that is in the incremental technologies. We are driven politically by the silver bullet, by the crisis. And we need to adjust to make sure that we have not only transformative investments, but also incremental technologies. And of course, those investments begin at the R&D stage and then go through the development and ultimately the deployment of those technologies. And so those investments can take a whole host of things, a whole host of approaches, whether it is a loan guarantee, whatever the incentive, but there needs to be and has to be a catalyst, an investment for us to make both transformative as well as incremental changes. Remember, this doesn't operate by the second law of thermodynamics. Third, something that I am really recovering from, and that is, I believe we need to enact a 21st century regulatory system. And let me get very specific. We talked about the smog in LA. Do you know that LA still has not met, and I'm not picking on LA because there are other parts of the country, but since it was brought up, is still not meeting the standard that was set over a decade ago? And that we can calculate the number of hospitalizations, premature deaths, asthma cases, and all the rest because of failure to meet the National Ambient Air Quality Standard? This is very serious. Yeah, great improvements, significant improvements, ones that we can see, ones that we can actually feel. In fact, one of the stories in parts of our country that if you wore a white shirt like mine and were outside for a day or two or an hour or two, your shirt would end up being dingy green or other colors. How many of you traveled to Beijing, China? Well, on one of my first visits, as part of the Strategic Economic Dialogue discussion, I was asked to comment on the air quality of China and Beijing. Now, what would you say? Yes. I said to the Chinese government host, I said, you know what I'm going to have to say. Do you really want to put me on camera and talk to, literally, in the Asia market, billions of people talking about the problems of air quality in China? They said yes. One of the most poignant pictures of the CNN interview that was part of this was they had me stand on a balcony. Well, let me set the stage for you. I don't like heights. And so we're on this whatever floor, 12th floor, whatever the number of floor was. And so the interviewer said, would you go out on the balcony? We think that it would be a better picture. Well, I don't like heights. The balcony was small. It looked to me like it was made out of bamboo. So you see the picture, you see the scene. But the poignant part of the picture, and it's kind of interesting as you go back and look at that interview, that at over literally a 10-minute period where I was being taped and asked questions and answers, the beginning of the interview, you could actually see the buildings behind me. Within 10 minutes' time, the air pollution, thanks to the Gobi Desert and a variety of other coal-fired power plants, a variety of other things, had totally obscured the buildings behind me. What is the Chinese proverb? A picture tells a thousand words. So as we think about a regulatory system, coming back to that, let's go to the Clean Air Act. The Clean Air Act requires, for national ambient air quality pollutants, that every pollutant be reviewed every 5 years. It's health-based. Cannot consider technology, cannot consider the cost to society in establishing the standard. So we set these standards. The agency sets these standards, being prohibited from considering economic and or is there a technology to achieve it. And so a standard is set, then it's turned over to the state develops a state implementation plan, and as long as there's incremental progress, doesn't matter whether it's a decade or more, then it's okay. Well, that's done for every single pollutant, every 5 years on a different cycle. So for SOx, NOx, particulate matter, for lead. By the way, what do you think the safe level of lead is to an unborn fetus and or child? What do you think the pediatric pulmonologist community would say is the safe level? What's the number? Now, you're a pediatric pulmonologist and you say that there is a safe level? You mean to tell me that if we took a child, your child, and put them into an air chamber and exposed them, that you would find that acceptable? I don't think so. The law doesn't require that. It says, what, in the judgment of the administrator, what is the health protective standard? Well, I guarantee you, when you look at the history of the Clean Air Act since 1990, every time the number keeps coming down. And we're soon going to be running into the dilemma of, and lead is a perfect example, that lead, last time I checked, is on the periodic table of elements. So how do we get to zero? We don't. And so then we have a standard, and then we have this sort of false sense of security that, well, we set this really health protective standard. We're not going to compromise the health of our nation. We set the standard, but oh, by the way, you know, is it going to take a decade, 2, 3, 4, 5 to achieve it, or never? So, why do I say that we need to enact a 21st century regulatory system? That is precisely the reason. We can't look at these pollutants just one individually alone. We need to look at them multi-pollutant, including greenhouse gas emissions. Because typically for pick your source, it's not just one of these chemicals. It's all of them. And so if you are Edison, or you can pick your favorite electric company, or not so favorite electric company, they have to make investments to deal with the equipment or the source, and so they can't be changing equipment, developing, having the capital investment, ratepayers, and all the rest. Every year you turn around, there needs to be some, again, 21st century regulatory system. Establish 21st century international agreements that are transparent, measurable, and verifiable. Our dilemma as a nation, and I'll talk about air pollution specifically, our dilemma as a nation, we can eliminate all greenhouse gases in the United States. We can eliminate all air pollution in the United States, and the United States still has a problem because of air transport. It is a global problem. So we should never, my judgment, never use that as an excuse not to do anything. But on the other hand, it definitely says why we as a nation have to pay attention and have to develop some meaningful international both relationships, but more importantly, agreements. And then the last bullet is, it's interesting to me, Mike Levin, one of my colleagues from Flex Energy, came over to the hotel to pick me up this morning, and I was a little late. And I said, Mike, I apologize, a little late, but a company just realized that one of their products was manufactured or the base products were in Japan, and they thought it was in the clear, but as the zone of concern and the level of nuclear catastrophic event was elevated to 7, found themselves a factory, not theirs, but a Japanese manufacturer, all of a sudden raising issues about the quality or potential quality of their product. And they don't have another supplier. Now you can quibble about whether there should be or shouldn't be, but the point is that you have to be involved, paying attention. There has to be the kind of international relations. There has to be being nimble. But on the last point, you really have to be a paladin. You really have to be a champion. If you're not, if I'm not, it won't happen again by the second law of thermodynamics. So speaking of being a champion, my last slide. Since I shamelessly promoted Bausch & Lomb and Chapman, I should add to that, be a paladin for Flex Energy. Imagine with me all of the landfills across the United States, all the water treatment plants, all the animal digesters, all the animal feeding operations, all the oil and gas operations that have off-spec methane gas. Then say, well, we've got a technology that uses that. It's not flaring. It's not a reciprocating engine. It's a microturbine. And using a thermal oxidizer, it not only, if you will, destroys the methane, the lousy methane, but it also doesn't create other air pollution. Now, as a former head of EPA, in one promoting methane to markets, we've got a potent greenhouse gas, 20 plus times, EPA says 23 times more potent than CO2. It happens to be a major pollutant. It also happens to be an energy source. Why wouldn't we? Well, let's go back to our checklist. Does it solve our nation's energy problems? No. Does it provide some incremental benefit? Absolutely. And so as we look forward and think about the challenges and this balance, again, my experience as on the board of directors with Flex, fantastic technology. We've got great investors. Do we need some more catalysts? Absolutely. Oh, by the way, hopefully you'll be able to get into Fort Benning, Georgia, to the Army base, because in August we're going to have a ribbon cutting of that unit, or one very similar to that on the bottom. Yes, the Army's very interested in pollution control and meeting the executive order mandate on alternative energy, but this is, again, important for energy security. My last scientific article that I wanted to point out to you, following along the lines of what I said, was a number of weeks ago. I don't know if you saw this article, but the title of the article is "The Rain on This Plane is Mainly Methane." The rain on this plane is mainly methane. Well, what it's talking about is that it turns out that the major moon for Saturn, the rain that is being observed is actually methane. So I was tempted to say, I'm here to say, as a member of the board of directors, we're going to have a launch sat, and we're going to put this on Saturn. I think I might have a problem. But the reason I raise this, it's kind of cute in that, in fact, that's what it is, and that methane is not just reserved, the issue of methane is not just reserved for our globe, but for other planets. But the reason I raise that is that, again, as we think about our alternative energy sources and needs and the checklist that we know that we have to do, we don't have to go to Saturn to begin addressing the issues that we have. I should say to my NASA colleague, wasn't revealed, but I started at Goddard Space Flight Center. And at Goddard Space Flight Center, I was on the launch support team for the first synchronous meteorological satellite, SMS-1, which was the first satellite that allowed a satellite, or kept the satellite in an equatorial orbit, which we began getting our first high-resolution pictures of our weather patterns. Little did I know, and I won't tell you how many years later, that I would be heading the EPA and working with our NASA colleagues to tackle the R&D issues and approaching issues such as climate change. So again, thank you for your attention, and if you have any questions, if time permits, I leave it to you. Thanks.
Yes. My name is Greg Watkins with Equinox Carbon Development, and I'd like to know your thoughts on the use of carbon finance in making this change.
I think that there should be a carbon market. In fact, I would go even further to say my own personal belief is that I think that as part of the 21st legislation piece, that I think that we need a cap and trade program as part of that being a carbon market. I know that's controversial, but in my experience and looking at, and if you have any question, look at the 1,000-page advance notice of proposed rulemaking that I signed on climate change. I think it is the most efficient economic model, and it is one that enables us to, again, move into in some of the international agreements to make sense. And also there's an economic consequence, both on the bad side as well as the good side, profitability.
I am Professor Hadjopoulos from Chapman University. I would like to know in which direction does it move the dilemma of President Obama?
Well, I should share with you that President Obama was, when he was a junior senator, was on my oversight committee. So I had the great opportunity to meet and work with him. I joined EPA under the Carter administration, and obviously I was an appointee under the Bush 43 administration. So I think that the dialing of the needle, I think that as presidents come in, they see the challenge that we have, as I said, from Nixon to Ford and others, and they want to make a bold statement and bold approach, which I think is good for the nation. But if it isn't followed up with very specific, not only strategic kinds of direction, but very specific and very tough decision making, because there will be winners and losers. And you want to try to be as technology agnostic as possible. So right now, when you look at Department of Energy budget, there's a lot of money going into biomass. Again, appropriately to try to address the oil issue that we have. But if we're ignoring the incremental opportunities for change and transformation, then we're missing. So I think that Secretary Chu and others, my certainly recommendation would be to not only focus on this transformational, but also put more into the incremental and recognize that the government really does have a role, whether it's 21st century regulation or whether it is investment being that catalyst for these new technologies. Thank you.
I'd like to call the next panel to come up, and Matt Demsidis will be the moderator. Matt heads Octane Group, to which several of us actually serve on the board, and he will be handling the next panel. We're, as you know, we're running behind. It's fine. We're just going to push the lunch a little bit by the time, but we're everywhere behind. So please take your seats.
Thanks, Menace. And thanks, Stephen. I thought the presentation was exceptional. For those of you that don't know me, I run an organization here in Orange County called Octane, and we focus on trying to connect people and ideas with resources and capital with an economic development goal. We're trying to help startups get going. We really have two fundamental beliefs at Octane. Number one is that the future isn't a foregone conclusion. and we have the ability to influence what happens in the future. And the second fundamental belief that we have is collaboratively we can accomplish a lot more than any of us can individually. So we try to really promote these fundamental beliefs in everything that we do. And I think that these are really the same two cornerstones that we're pursuing at this conference. You know, the title is Energy, Economy, and Environment. And I think in order to drive any fundamental change in human behavior, we need to have both the push and the pull. On the push side, we need to have the technologies, and we've heard a lot about the technologies. This panel is going to specifically focus on the pull side and what's going on in terms of the economics of this in order to pull the technology through. We're really lucky to have 3 or 4 distinguished speakers. Jude Elledge and Doug Smith. Doug is the founder CEO of Village Green Global, and Jude is one of their vice presidents. And they have really done a lot of work in terms of trying to make fundamental changes in human behavior, and they'll talk about that. Mike Levin is really one of the foremost legal experts in terms of regulation associated with clean technologies, and the founder of Cleantech OC here in Orange County. And Peter Polidor is a venture capitalist. And Sail Venture Partners is one of the few venture capital firms that focuses exclusively on sustainable energy. So with that, I'll turn it over to Doug and Jude to start us off.
Thank you. Village Green. I could talk about Flex Energy, but
Oh, sorry about that.
they're a good company.
It was all planned that way.
Does he want us to flip?
Okay.
I'll put those in.
See if this thing works. So while we're waiting, it's interesting. I'm a software company, and I always have technology issues when I present. That's just the way it works. Perhaps Doug. Thanks. I'm new to this. So before we get started, my name's Doug Smith. As you heard, I'm the founder of a company called Village Green Global. I did move to the United States in 2009, hence there is a different accent. So I'll endeavour to not use words that I use a lot when I'm back in Australia. But nonetheless, coming from Australia, there was a dramatic raise in awareness in relation to climate energy efficiency back from about 2000, 2002. And we were really influenced by a lot of activities that were happening in Europe, particularly. And I moved out here into California back in 2009 to really show businesses how they could start to become engaged in what is becoming a fast-moving, what is becoming a fast-moving economy. So in my presentation today, we'll go through first of all what Village Green is about very quickly, and then I'll run a quick myth-busting session on the carbon industry. And then I'd like to talk quickly about carbon financing and how that can support a low-carbon economy in the United States and around the world. And I'll keep talking on that until someone tells me to stop. Thank you. So, okay. So I developed a software product that's looking at the consumption values for energy, waste, water, and transport. But then I wanted to make sure that we could actually prove activities against the behaviours in which people operate certain equipment in their workplace and in home and around the world. But then I couldn't find a tool at the time that could do that, so I wanted to create something that could then be verified against utility billing so that people could actually prove and be satisfied with the account of activities that they had with the changes they were making. For so often we hear about changes that people occur with in relation to their projects that they might be doing, but there's no proof point to actually say, well, have they actually achieved what they set out to achieve? And we heard from the different sessions before about, you need to have a measurable, robust and verifiable account of your activities in order to engage in some of these larger projects. These days, we're actually working with a lot of large companies that are either being asked through a compliance regulation to measure and report on their greenhouse gas emissions, or it might be from a voluntary standpoint where businesses are adopting strong corporate social responsibility outcomes for their community of customers to demonstrate that they are actually trying to do their part for their environment. We've seen so many times over the last, in my case, I've been in this industry for about 12 years, where companies have been, I guess, put into the public, into the media spotlight for their inability to prove the claims they're making in relation to their environmental activities. And that's becoming a really big issue for a lot of companies. I know in Australia there was a large, I can say what it was Bridgestone, because they had to do a full media retraction of their claims that their tyres were environmentally friendly. Now, they're made of rubber. There's nothing environmentally friendly about that at all. But after the $250,000 fine and the full media retractions they had to go through, saying that they actually misled the public, that actually starts to really hurt the company. And so from that point, that company is one of the most progressive in reporting and measuring its activities in that space now. So because they've been attracted. So that's where I see a strong advocate. I'm a strong advocate for government policy and regulation to make sure that organisations are doing what they say they do. The other part to our business now is we're moving very quickly into a space where we're helping large renewable energy projects understand the carbon financing opportunities that exist within their projects. And so often many projects have stalled or what we call distressed because they can't actually fund their projects to make them a reality. And so I'm working very closely with a lot of what they call carbon-based equity funds around the world that are very interested and very capitalised to actually support projects through project financing and so on. And I'll talk more about that a bit later as well. So we've all seen Mythbusters. I actually had to present for the people that actually wrote, that do the Mythbusters show at a proper conference where they had the proper narrator from Mythbusters and all those guys. And then the audience had to decide if I debunked the myth or not. No pressure in that session. Okay, so these are a couple of common ones that I'm sure many of us have heard in the room before. Who's heard the one that the carbon market doesn't exist in the United States? Has anyone heard that one? No? Yes? Okay, we have. Without compliance, there's no trading. Has anyone heard that before? And carbon trading will not impact the United States. Has anyone heard that one? Yes? No? Okay. Okay, well, our view, our educated view on this, is that, we'll get to the slide, is that last year investment banks had $750 million in earnings through carbon trading. So for a market that doesn't exist, I want to be in that market. And there are actually two markets, and people aren't aware of this in the place. That there's actually a voluntary market of carbon trading, where it's predominantly business to business doing transactions, or there's the compliance markets. And a lot of us may have heard of the Kyoto Protocol. That's a big compliance market, and what you hear in the United States about a cap and trade model, that's a compliance market. But people aren't aware, especially a lot of the customers I'm dealing with, that there is actually a voluntary market that can be traded internationally today from the US. Now, and what's the risk around this? Well, if the United States doesn't participate, well, there's many offshore funds now that we know of, and we're dealing with, that are wanting to project finance projects in the United States. In return, they want the credits, the energy or emission credits that come from these projects back to those offshore funds. Now, if we look at, in the time that I've been here, I've heard a lot about the decline in manufacturing process in the United States. At least with manufacturing, we knew what we had before we lost it. With the carbon markets, we haven't even really worked out what we've got yet, and we're losing it before we understand it. And that's going to be a big risk, because all of the funds I deal with at the moment in real world are all offshore, and none of them are based here in the United States. And guess what they're doing? They're coming into the United States to do the transactions. They're removing the dependency of utility and government, and they're working straight with the business. And then they lock them up for 20 years. So these are big challenges and opportunities that I see it as a big opportunity for the United States to really capitalise on that and take advantage of it and lead the world. It has a really good opportunity to do that. So in relation to the carbon markets, according to an accounting firm, PricewaterhouseCoopers, by 2020, this will be a $4 trillion industry. So in the next 9 years, $4 trillion, or €2 trillion, depending on which side of the... The other thing, at the moment, the industry is worth $144 billion globally. So the numbers are there, and what's happening now is the carbon funds that I'm dealing with particularly are saying, we want access to the projects you work with, we will project finance them, in return we want all the credits that come from that. Now, one of the projects I'm dealing with at the moment on that model, we're doing one that potentially there will be a $180 million retrofit on a property at no upfront cost to the client. Why is that? Because of the credits that it will generate, the outside of tax incentive. And we're not talking about RECs. RECs are another, or renewable energy certificate, are another form of energy-based credit within these organisations. So we're doing a lot of work with organisations to show the creation of what they call a sale and purchase agreement for the credits. Not for the power, but for the credits. And then we provide them with contracts from carbon funds that will purchase those credits before you even start the project. So there's significant movement going on in this market now that's removing the need for the subsidies and incentive that we heard of before. But more importantly for the projects, it future-proofs the validity of these projects so they can actually go forward and get started. The economic drivers to these projects, all of them, and everyone you've heard about today, is significant. The amount of jobs that these projects create for a local community, the amount of education that is adopted locally and internationally is tremendous. More importantly, it creates a faster learning curve on learning about the new next technology. Because until we do start the projects, we can't learn, we can't know what we don't know yet. So we have to go through those processes and accelerate that along. So I think from our point of view, we're very excited to be working with a lot of different organisations here, a lot of cities at the moment, that have got a lot of what we call stalled projects that can't get funding for their projects, and so the carbon financing is helping them to support their projects to get it started, and then it goes from there. But I think I'm just about done on my time, and I've got 40 seconds left, so I think I'd like to, I'm around all day, and Jude takes my book, so if you'd like to have a chat during lunch or something, please, I welcome any questions you may have later on. Thank you.
You can put the flex ones up now. Well, I'm Mike Levin. I'm the Director of Government Affairs for Flex. A couple people definitely want to thank. One is Steve Johnson. I think you heard in just about a half hour really just what an extraordinary person and how knowledgeable he is. Just an extraordinary dedicated public servant, first career scientist to run EPA, and I feel truly honored and fortunate to get to spend about a month, just on the road with him, whether we're in Washington, D.C. or in Sacramento or what have you. I think he's getting sick of Sacramento, but, particularly since... Yeah, right. But particularly since I think, he's got grandkids and a family and everything else, I think he's out there doing this because he cares so passionately about clean technology and specifically about this company. And I'm the same way. I graduated from law school. For any college basketball fans, I went to Duke for law school, so you can boo if you like. But after graduating, I thought, okay, I'm going to be an environmental lawyer, and I'm going to just bury myself in regulations, some of which Steve helped to create, and that'll be that. And what I saw was this extraordinary emerging regulatory political framework around clean technology, and I had no idea both how complicated it is, but also how exciting it is. And I decided fairly early in my legal career that it was going to be my life's work. And I had just an extraordinary opportunity to work with some great people at a law firm called Bryan Cave here in Irvine. And Greg Tremarsh, who hired me at Bryan Cave, and I started something called Clean Tech OC. And basically we started it kind of because Bryan Cave didn't like paying for all the conferences we went to, so we said, well, let's just bring the conference to us and start an organization that would be the kind of the official trade organization for the clean tech industry in the county. It's a true story. And along the way we met a lot of the folks in this room, and of course Matt Genucitis from Octane has been a tremendous partner. But we've gone, we literally went from 0 members, 0 money, just kind of an idea on a sheet of paper. Now we have about 100 members, we have a full-time staff, we have a little bit of money. But we've got, I think, all the promise in the world, because when you look at clean technology, even in the midst of this recession, the clean technology economy is thriving in this county. We've got over 300 companies in the county. We've got some of the largest clean tech venture capital firms in the world right here in Orange County. Peter works at one of them. Going to talk about that. And, when I looked at Flex Energy, I first met the team at Flex in 2008, late 2008, early 2009. It was basically about 5 people, 6 people. And here we are, beginning of 2011, and there's over 100. So extraordinary growth. And when I looked at Flex, and I'll go into some of the specifics, Steve briefly hit on it, I saw this extraordinary challenge and this also equally extraordinary opportunity. The challenge was that Flex had developed this new technology that nobody had ever heard of that could take methane gas and convert it into electricity with virtually no emissions. And because nobody had ever heard about it, and nobody knew what it was, they certainly couldn't incentivize it. They certainly wouldn't want to buy it straight away. So, huge challenge, right? As Steve mentioned, they want to see it proven and working for like a decade before they'll commit to doing anything. But the opportunity was, as I looked at this, I said that this technology probably ticked off more boxes than virtually any other renewable energy technology. And I'll get into a little bit of that. So it all starts with methane, right? And as Steve briefly stated, methane is this very potent greenhouse gas that remains in the atmosphere for a long time, 9 to 15 years. And this is all the EPA's data. I have an in at the EPA who helped me with this, get some of this data. But the 9 to 15 years is deceiving because these landfills are around for 100 years. And over time, the methane sticks around. It's really nasty stuff. And it's over 20 times worse as a greenhouse gas, going back to some of the NASA slides earlier, than CO2. We think all the time how bad CO2 is. There's a lot of debate over, some people think global warming is the most pressing problem in the world. Others think, obviously, that it's not. What we do know is that methane is 20 times worse than CO2 when it comes to global climate change. And it's everywhere. Landfills, oil drilling, natural gas drilling, agricultural activities, things like combined animal feeding operations, coal mining, wastewater treatment plants. Methane is everywhere. And the problem has been that if you want to convert methane into electricity, you had to pollute. You had to create other pollutants. So methane at its core, basically the big part of methane is natural gas, right? So it has this great energy potential. But burning methane creates NOx, creates CO, creates VOCs, all kinds of bad things that lead to smog, cancer, death, bad stuff. So in California in particular, it's very hard to convert methane into energy. So the promise of doing it cleanly is huge. So let's talk about a landfill for a second. I never thought in my wildest dreams I would enjoy hanging out at landfills, but now from time to time I do. So you open a landfill, you start filling the landfill with trash, and this methane starts to eventually seep out. And about 35 years into the landfill, you close it. And once you close it, the quantity and quality of methane degrades over time. Now, they try to do traditional power generation. They try to run an internal combustion engine at a landfill. But unfortunately, that will only work for about 20 years because you need very good quality and quantity of methane gas. You need like 45% or higher quality of methane gas. So what do they do instead? They flare it or burn it. You go around, you can drive up to Newport Coast, just down the road here, and just to the east of those beautiful $10 million homes is a candlestick flare at the Coyote Canyon landfill where they're just burning off methane gas into the atmosphere. I bet they didn't know that when they signed their mortgages. But you need about 25 or 30% methane even to flare it. So what they do in order to flare gas, because otherwise you have to vent it, right? Anything under that curve just gets vented in the atmosphere. So what they'll do is they'll mix good pipeline quality natural gas, or good quality natural gas, with the bad stuff just to be able to flare it. This is ridiculous. So Flex comes along and says, we've got a fix for this. Rather than making the gas, basically what had been happening is in order to run methane in an engine, you had to improve the quality of the methane up to about 45 or 50%. So they'd be spiking the methane with good gas to get it to run on an engine. So it's always this question of how to improve the concentration. Well, our founder, who I think didn't realize how hard this was, said, we're going to go the other way. We're going to dilute the gas all the way down to 1.5%. So in effect, what goes into our system is only 1.5% methane gas and 98.5% air, breathable air. And amazingly, with the proper compression, the proper pressure, the proper heat, and the proper time, they were able to figure out how to create enough heat, a high enough temperature, to be able to power a microturbine. So it had never been done before. We're the only people that ever figured out how to do it. Sale Venture Partners said, that's really cool, here's some money. We spent it. They said, here's some more. We spent that, here's some more. So what can I say? Steve Johnson joined the board. I left the law firm. I said, this is the coolest thing ever. I joined as a 23rd employee. We've now got about 100. And I hope that we'll double that. And we're creating high-skilled, high-wage jobs. As I always try to remember everybody when they say that, remember, this green jobs thing is not a myth. It's really happening. If you want proof, it's happening in our company. So we created this Flex power station over there on the right. That's kind of, that's what I'm talking about. That's the device that converts methane into energy with virtually no emissions. At its core, as I mentioned, is a microturbine. And it turns out there are only two companies in the world that are really making microturbines. One's called Capstone. They're based in Chatsworth. The other is Ingersoll Rand, based in Portsmouth, New Hampshire. Of course, Ingersoll Rand's a huge multinational company. But those are the only two companies making these things. So Flex Energy, through the, what I can only tell you is just like miraculous talents of our CEO, Joe Perry, we wound up purchasing the Ingersoll Rand microturbine division. So now Flex Energy is one of only two microturbine manufacturers in the world, and the Capstone, the competing product, cannot replicate the emissions profile of the Flex power station, meaning we're the only company in the world that can do this, which is pretty cool. We also sell the microturbine as a standalone product, and the more of those that we sell, the better R&D we can put into that to make it even better. So over the last, 9 months to a year, extraordinary, and I don't need to go bullet by bullet, but I think the bottom is really the most important. We are shipping these Flex power stations to the United States military. And that might seem counterintuitive that the military would be the first to jump on board. But when you actually look at where they get their energy, it makes all the sense in the world. And what their motivations are makes even more sense. So they care about localized power, they care about baseload power, they care about efficient power. They can't be importing any of their power from outside the United States. So the extent that they use petroleum, it's from the Strategic Petroleum Reserve. So we come along and we say we have this portable system that you can install on a base where you can take the methane from your landfill or from your wastewater and convert it into electricity. They were all in. So we're installing the first one, and hopefully many more will follow. Our markets, basically anywhere you have methane, we want to be there, right? We just love the stuff. And we kind of fit halfway between, kind of in the convergence of all these different markets and all these different regulations. That, as a regulatory guy, that's why it got me excited. I presume that's the same with Dr. Johnson. But going up to CARB, you know, it's amazing. California Resources Board, they set standards. And sometimes they set standards that nobody can hit. They really like when people come along and say, no, our company can hit that. Then they can set more difficult standards. But if these companies don't come along, and if the investment framework in the United States isn't advantageous for new technologies to adapt and to evolve and for people to come up with the science and to do this stuff, we're going to lose. We will lose. China spends $12 million an hour, $12 million an hour on clean technology development. We import $1 billion in foreign oil a day. We're going to lose if we're not careful. Look forward to answering any questions.
Well, it's always nice to hear your portfolio company remembers that you gave them money once, twice, 3 times. So, as we were saying, I work for Sail Capital Partners, which is a clean tech venture firm here based in Orange County, and Flex is one of our portfolio companies. And when I was looking at the idea of energy in the economy, you know, when we look at companies, we don't ask ourselves, is this going to change the world in the sense of cleaner air? We don't ask ourselves, is this going to be a technology that makes the world better? We ask ourselves, what is this company doing to save money? What is this company doing to be more efficient? What is this company doing to make the world kind of do more with less? That's our definition of clean tech, essentially. Flex is a company that takes what's called waste gas, meaning throw it away because it doesn't do anything, and they turn it into power that's cleaner than what the waste gas is by itself. So one of the first things we always think about is that this is not an issue in California, in the US, but it's global. Here you see one of the first pictures of the world at night. You know, it's not hard to picture that energy is a big issue when you have a large portion of the earth kind of lit up at night. But what that actually comes down to is, going back to Matthew's point of this is a pull issue, meaning whether it's supply and demand, it's an economic principle we understand, energy demand is going up. And it's not just us saying that, oh, we have China and India and the developing world want to all of a sudden start using energy. But think about ourselves here in the US. 10 years ago, what did you plug into the wall? Your TV. 5 years ago, what did you plug into the wall? Your phone, your TV, and any other kind of appliances. What are you going to start plugging in a couple of years? Your car. So our demand level is actually going up as well. So being able to handle that and be able to come up with new innovations that can approach that and better understand it is very important. This is the slide that kind of explains more or less the drivers behind what's going on in clean tech today. And I say clean tech meaning our firm doesn't just focus on energy, but we invest in energy, water, agriculture, the world's largest markets. And what you tend to see here is you have the demand issue, you have the price of fossil fuels, people don't want to pay $5 a gallon for something, and energy security. Now, energy security is obviously a big issue because not only can they not go and buy these fossil fuels and be reliant on these not-so-friendly countries, but even if they start using renewable energy, there's an issue with renewables in the sense that wind and solar, as Mark pointed out from SCE, you know, if a cloud goes over your 100-megawatt plant, all of a sudden you're not pumping out 100 megawatts of energy all of a sudden. So how do you address that? You can't have NORAD shut down for an hour to let the clouds pass by. So there's got to be technologies that can address these issues and enable these technologies to take place. Things like energy storage, things like Flex Energy, which is actually a reliable source of clean energy. Environmental awareness. The fact that this conference is actually happening explains that people are becoming more aware of what's going on with our environment, what's going on with climate change, what's going on with these new innovations, both on the corporate level and on the private enterprise level. Public policy. Dr. Johnson did a great job of talking about, you know, the difficulties and the greater attention being paid now in government towards these issues. And more importantly, on the cost of clean. So again, I'm going to call out on Mark here, who mentioned earlier, if a solar power plant costs less than a coal fire, I'm going to do the solar plant. Not because it's clean and not because someone tells me to, but because it's cheaper. So how do we drive that cost downwards? Dr. Sprigg, you said, Tidal Energy, they were trying to put a project in that cost $17 million per megawatt. So that doesn't work. That does not compute. You can't get an ROI on that. Maybe in about 100, 200 years possibly, but you got to come up with technologies that offer that return on investment to the people who are paying the money for it, whether it's through carbon credits, whether it's through more efficient systems, or whether it's through the bottom line of the capital cost. It's all important. And that's why you see things like how clean tech has become the #1 investment category of venture capital. My firm has been in the space since 2002, since the word clean tech was kind of just created. So I can tell you it wasn't that popular back then from what I hear to be a clean tech investor. But it's one that's seeing tremendous growth. In fact, this shows right here from the clean tech group, this shows the levels of investment in the clean tech sector. Blue bars is the dollar value, the red line is the actual number of deals. Now it's important to correlate those two because what we're seeing now is we have a record quarter this past quarter of $2.6 billion invested in clean tech. But if you notice, the red line dropped. What that's telling you is that now these innovations, these new technologies, these younger companies are not getting the money they need because it's all going to later stage deals. It's all going to the ones that instead of costing $11 million in average deal size, it's costing $19 million. So all of a sudden, these young companies, these great ideas, Flex Energy 3, 4, 5 years ago, they're not going to get the funding they need. So this is an issue that we need to address because from my standpoint, as an investor, it makes more sense for me to go get those returns in a safer bet, if I can do it, than a more risky bet. So you have firms like ourselves moving more and more towards the later stage. And that's pretty much it. I will actually add one more thing. This first slide. So I pointed out this is energy demand. But one thing that people often miss, and I used to be one of those people until I saw a TEDx conference, is that all this light you're seeing is wasted light. Meaning, who's out in space needing light for their reading? This is an example of energy efficiency. This is an example of a global inefficiency we face today, meaning we're wasting energy wherever we go. So how can we make it more efficient? Thank you.
Excellent. I really appreciate all of the presenters. Jude, did you have anything in particular that you wanted to add to the discussion?
Yeah, I think, thank you, Matthew, for that. And I do not have a presentation. Doug's actually done the presentation for us. But I think in synthesising the three speakers, what I've always been very grateful for and amazed with working with Manaz here at Chapman is the willingness to work with organisations like ourselves and start to understand. And I do a lot of work with a non-profit organisation called VitalLink, educating high school students about their career paths in this sector. And it continues to amaze me every day that, when I'm at this, that the kids just do not know that our industries exist. And the ones of us that are in this industry know the power of it and how quickly it's growing, but trying to, Doug and I for the last 2 years really have spent a good 2 years educating an uneducated market. And we do need to get that really out into our communities. We need to touch everybody's lives and truly get the education level right up there. So I really enjoyed this presentation.
Excellent. Well, I think we have a few minutes for questions. I actually have one just to get things started, and towards Peter. With the exception of Village Green and Flex Energy, what are the hot investment sectors that you see right now within the sustainable major sector?
So the #1 sector is still solar, but the places where you're seeing the greatest innovations and the greatest impacts, I want to say, or the game-changing technologies, you have energy storage. Energy efficiency is huge because if you can't deal with the production side, the actual production, at least deal with the demand side. Other sources of power, renewable power generation, such as Flex. And then the big one, kind of the market that now all of a sudden you see a lot of VCs moving into and coming to realize is water. whether it be the recycling of water, desalination, water purification, all these different, I mean, this is a $1 trillion market. I think the number was $17 trillion needs to be spent to get the to get the energy and water infrastructure of the world to where it needs to be in the next 10 years.
Yeah.
I'd like to be in that market.
Yeah, water conservation is another kind of major movement that's going on. I heard recently that that one of the things that you could do to become an active water conservator is become a vegetarian, because the water associated with the production of beef is much, much greater than the production of vegetables. So it was actually at a TED conference as well, and they said, 5 days a week I'm a vegetarian, and that's what I'm doing to conserve water. How about
to the water comment?
Yeah.
Coming from Australia, I was part of a 12-year drought, and when I first moved to California, I talked about the denial years that Californians are in, which is the drought they're in that they don't know they're in yet. We thought that for the first 4 or 5 years in Australia that there wasn't a drought, but it just didn't stop. So eventually, by years 6 and 7, you realise that you have to start doing something. And I think we heard earlier in the presentations today about it's that crisis change that makes behaviours shift. And it's only when you realise you don't have water to actually do your daily functions that you realise you have to change your behaviour. And unfortunately, we have a luxury of living in a society that we don't see that we have a finite supply of water.
This question is for Mike. Really impressed with your flex energy technology. I have quite a few landfill methane projects outside the U.S. and also dairy projects in California. Is your equipment part of an approved methodology standard that can be used in both the compliance and non-compliant or voluntary markets?
Yeah, so we're CARB certified. I think that's probably the biggest competitive advantage that we have is, California Resources Board is probably one of the toughest gatekeepers of anything that, any methane energy technology. And, they've looked at the microturbines actually for quite a while. Our founder used a microturbine at the core of the Flex Power Station because it's already been CARB certified. That microturbine, the Ingersoll Rand microturbine there is the cleanest on the market. So yes, and we should talk.
Okay. I'm very impressed with what everybody in this panel does, but I have a question. I personally could not write a check for $10 million to invest for anybody. But is there an avenue where private citizens like myself could have 401k monies going into energies, renewable energies, clean tech, whatever, to help fund some of these projects?
Well, one suggestion, I'm talking to CPUC at the moment about the creation of an energy efficiency reinvestment fund. And so that reinvestment fund then allows, post-2012, when all of the major government funding subsides, that programs like AB32 and others can then be self-supported. And I think we heard in earlier sessions today about that need to have self-supporting initiatives. And that's where California particularly has a unique opportunity to create its own investment fund that allows industry and it could be pension funds and other things that start to invest into that. And then they get a dividend, so they're actually getting a benefit, but they're also supporting the low carbon economy for the region.
How did you find out about who to talk to regarding that?
When you get a card.
Okay.
Also,
For these others.
Also, I would just add, I mean, from sales standpoint, a lot of the clean tech firms in the world, we get most of our money from pension plans. So if you're part of a pension, talk to your pension about what's our renewable applications or things along those lines. So.
If you have a $10 million check, I'll be glad to just have 10% of that. And you can write from any fund you like to.
Mike, this is a question for you about the Flex Energy microturbine power plant, which I think is great. You use thermal process, right, to decompose the emission gases to very, very low levels. So you're putting energy back in to do that. So what is your net energy out? I noticed you had an energy output for the system, but what is your net energy gain, factoring in what you have to put in to heat things up?
Well, it's a great question. The first thing I'd say is what would be done with that methane but for our system? It would be burned, right? So there's the energy that is used to burn the methane. So net, we're actually not that much worse than just flaring the gas. In terms of the overall system efficiency, the microturbine has about a 33% efficiency, but then you have to figure there's an exhaust heat coming. It's a clean, hot air that basically comes from the system, and that heat, that hot air, you can use in many different applications. You can even do combined chilling. So you could do combined heat and power. You can do combined chilling heat and power. If you do that, then your efficiency goes up to 60, 70, 80%. And I think that's really where the sweet spot is where you're making, it's like Peter's slide on the light, right? We want all possible resources that may be wasted to be used. So you can take the waste heat and you can use it for hot water. You could use it to potentially power a cooling system, a chiller at a data center, for example. So there's all kinds of, many different things you can do. And I think if you look at fuel cells, you look at microturbines, the efficiencies are improving all the time. I know that it's one of the things that we do with sales money is we try to work on the overall system efficiency of the microturbine.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Mike.
Thank you.
Okay, well.
Again, thank you, Tom. We are going to have lunch, but before we do that, let me just have some closing remarks. I certainly personally appreciated all the participants, the audience, the panelists and speakers. As we have these conferences or this mini conference like today, we all get excited. We have a lot of good ideas, but it's very, very important to have follow-ons and follow-ups. So I really pass on to a request and to the audience, to everybody who's been here, to keep giving us your ideas and what we discussed before, Kevin, some sort of ongoing business alliance with academia, with the CHAP in particular, but of course we can also bring in other universities, the Jet Propulsion Laboratory. These problems cannot be solved by any one of us, any of our sectors, but we can solve them and address them directly. So you have our email addresses, and I'll probably be in touch with some of you, if not all of you, maybe all of you in terms of some sort of broad call for collaboration, and then the specific points that probably will be raising with some of you. There's literature outside, and I hope you use the luncheon time for more discussions and networking among everybody. Again, thank you very much. See you next time.